burlap sack smelled of hay and old blood. Vera Brennan stood on the auction platform, hands bound with rough rope, trying not to flinch as thick fingers prodded her shoulders like she was livestock. Around her, men laughed. The kind of laughter that made her skin crawl, that reminded her of 3 years trapped in hell, that promised more of the same if she ended up in the wrong hands. She could see nothing through the coarse weave, only shadows and light shapes moving in the October afternoon. But she could hear everything, every crude joke, every assessment of her worth, every bid that reduced her to less than human. "Come now, gentlemen," Howard Finch called out, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Surely someone here needs a woman about the house. Strong as an ox, this one. Works from dawn to dusk without complaint." Vera wanted to spit at him, but that was part of the plan. Play docile, play broken, let them think she had no fight left. Because she did have fight left, enough to burn the whole world down if that's what it took to get free. "She ain't much to look at," someone shouted from the crowd. Laughter rippled through the gathering. "Why the sack, Finch? Let's see what we're buying." Finch cleared his throat. His boots creaked on the wooden platform as he shifted his weight. Vera knew he was nervous. He had every right to be. This was dangerous for both of them. "Terms of sale, my friends. Previous owner's orders. The hood stays on until purchase is complete. Take it or leave it, but the price reflects the condition of the merchandise." Previous owner. Vera's jaw clenched behind the burlap. Cyrus Hargrave, the man who thought he owned her, the man who believed people could be bought and kept and used until they broke. He was going to learn different. The bidding started low. $3, $2, men losing interest, already turning away to discuss more interesting prospects. The autumn livestock auction, perhaps. Actual animals that might be worth their time. Vera felt the familiar weight of despair pressing down. What if no one bought her? What if Finch had to return her to Hargrave? 3 months of planning, of saving every scrap of information, of convincing Finch to betray his employer for the right price. All of it for nothing. Then a voice cut through the dispersing crowd. Deep, rough with disuse, certain. $10. Silence fell over the square. Vera's heart hammered against her ribs. $10 was almost everything, more than she was worth legally speaking, more than any sane man would pay for damaged goods. Finch recovered quickly. $10 from the gentleman, going once, going twice. A pause theatrical and brief. Sold to Caleb Rivers. Footsteps approached the platform. Heavy boots on wood. Vera forced herself to breathe slowly, to not show fear, to not show anything at all. She felt him before she saw him. A presence beside her, solid and somehow different from the other men. No grabbing, no rough handling, just a quiet voice near her ear. "Can you walk?" Vera nodded. "My horse is there." A gentle pressure on her elbow, guiding, not forcing. "We're leaving now." She followed, stumbling slightly on the platform edge. His hand steadied her. Through the burlap she saw his shape, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the confidence of someone used to difficult terrain. As they descended the steps, Finch pressed papers into the stranger's hand. "She's all yours, Rivers. Good luck. You'll need it." The stranger said nothing, just helped Vera onto a horse, then swung up behind her. His arms came around to hold the reins, caging her in, but somehow not threatening. They rode out of Cedar Ridge without another word. Caleb Rivers hadn't planned to buy a woman that morning. He'd ridden down from his mountain cabin for supplies, salt flour, coffee, the bare necessities that even a man who chose solitude couldn't do without. 3 months since his last trip to town, and he wouldn't be here now if Toby hadn't insisted his stores were running dangerously low. At 41, Caleb had learned to live with loneliness the way other men lived with chronic pain. It was always there, a dull ache in the center of his chest, but manageable, survivable, until today. He'd meant to ride past the commotion in the town square, meant to complete his business and return to his self-imposed exile in the mountains. But then he'd seen Howard Finch on that platform, and something cold had settled in his gut. Finch had been at Rebecca's funeral 6 years ago. Caleb remembered because the man had arrived late, slipping in at the back, whispering with someone in expensive clothes. A tall man with silver hair and cold eyes. Cyrus Hargrave. Caleb had been too deep in grief to confront them then, too lost in the howling void where his wife used to be. But he'd never forgotten. So when Finch started his auction, when the hooded woman appeared like some medieval punishment, Caleb had stayed. Curiosity, maybe. Or that old anger never quite buried, rising up again. Then the wind had shifted. Just for a moment, just enough. The burlap sack had moved, revealing a sliver of the woman's face. Her eye, one eye catching the afternoon light. Brown, deep brown, like good earth. Rebecca had eyes like that. One brown, one blue. Heterochromia, the doctor had called it. Rare and striking. And the first thing Caleb had noticed when they met, his hand had moved to his money before his brain caught up. $10. Nearly everything he'd brought for supplies. Gone in an impulse he couldn't explain and didn't try to justify. Now she sat rigid in front of him on his horse, this stranger with eyes that reminded him of his dead wife. The autumn forest closed around them as they climbed higher into the mountains, leaving Cedar Ridge far below. 2 hours passed in silence. The woman never relaxed, never leaned back against him. Just held herself separate, a coiled spring of tension and suspicion. Caleb understood. He'd bought her after all. As far as she knew, he was just another man who thought money gave him rights over another human being. "Where are you taking me?" Her voice was hoarse, muffled by the sack, but clear enough. "Somewhere safe," Caleb said. Then, because he owed her honesty, somewhere Howard Finch's employer can't reach. Her sharp intake of breath told him everything. She knew who he meant, and she was terrified. "How did you—" She stopped, started again. "How do you know about him? I know what Cyrus Hargrave does to people who cross him." Caleb kept his voice neutral, his eyes on the trail ahead. "I know he takes what he wants and calls it legal. I know he destroys anyone who refuses to bend." Another silence, then barely a whisper. "You know him." "I know what he took from me." Caleb didn't elaborate. Some wounds were too deep to share with strangers. "And I know you're running from him." "I paid Finch," she said suddenly, urgently. "I paid him to sell me, to get me away. This wasn't— I chose this." Caleb absorbed that. A woman desperate enough to orchestrate her own sale. Smart enough to plan an escape that looked like recapture, brave enough to risk everything on the hope that whoever bought her would be better than what she was fleeing. "Then you chose well," he said quietly. "I'm not Hargrave. I'm not any man who thinks he owns you. I just—" He paused, searching for words. "I just couldn't watch another person suffer because of him." The woman said nothing more. But slowly, incrementally, some of the rigidity left her spine. The cabin appeared as dusk painted the mountains purple and gold, small, built of weathered logs with a stone chimney releasing a thin thread of smoke into the evening air. Surrounded by pine and aspen, perched on a ridge that looked out over endless wilderness. Isolated, remote, safe. Caleb dismounted first, then helped the woman down. She swayed slightly stiff from the long ride. He steadied her with a hand on her arm. "Inside," he said. "I'll tend the horse." She hesitated at the door, still hooded, still blind, still uncertain if she'd traded one prison for another. "You can remove it yourself," Caleb added. "Once you're inside, take your time." He led his horse to the small lean-to beside the cabin, taking longer than necessary with the task, giving her space, giving her a moment to breathe without being watched. When he finally entered, she was standing by the fireplace. The burlap sack lay crumpled on the floor like a shed skin, and Caleb's breath caught. She wasn't Rebecca. That much was immediately painfully clear. Her face was all angles where Rebecca's had been soft curves. Her skin was weathered by sun and hardship where Rebecca's had been pale and protected. Her hair, auburn threaded with premature silver, had been chopped short and uneven, hanging just past her jaw. But her eyes, one brown deep and warm, one hazel flecked with green and gold, different from Rebecca's blue and brown, but close enough, similar enough, enough to make his chest ache with a grief he thought he'd buried. "You're not her," Caleb said. Not an accusation, just a fact heavy with disappointment he couldn't quite hide. The woman watched him with those striking eyes, wary, calculating. "Who did you think I was? Someone I lost." Caleb moved to the table, putting distance between them. "A long time ago." A scar cut across her left eyebrow, pale against tanned skin. She was tall, nearly matching his height, with the build of someone used to hard labor, strong shoulders, calloused hands, the body of a survivor. "My name is Vera," she said. Not an offering of trust, just basic information. "Vera Brennan, and I don't know what you want from me, but I need you to understand something." Caleb waited. "I will never go back." Her voice was quiet but absolute. "I will die first. If that's your plan to return me to him, you should know that." "It's not my plan." Caleb moved to the cabinet, pulled out 2 tin cups and a pot of cold stew from the night before. "Sit. You must be hungry." Vera didn't move. "Then what do you want?" He set the cups on the table, met her eyes directly. "Honestly, I don't know. I saw you on that platform and I acted. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm desperate. Maybe I'm just a fool who saw something familiar in a stranger's eyes and thought it could fill a hole that's been empty for 6 years. He laughed, bitter and short. "I'm sorry. That's not fair to you. You're not responsible for my grief." Vera studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she moved to the table and sat. 6 years is a long time to be alone." "Yes." Caleb ladled stew into a pan to warm over the fire. "It is." "The woman you lost, she had eyes like mine." "Similar." He didn't look at her, couldn't. "Heterochromia, one brown, one blue. The doctor said it was rare. I said it was beautiful." "What happened to her?" Caleb's hands stilled on the ladle. "Fever, or so they said. She got sick after we had visitors, after we refused to sell our land. A week later the fever came. 2 weeks later she was gone." He heard Vera's sharp intake of breath. "Hargrave," she said. Not a question. "I couldn't prove it." Caleb returned to the table with 2 bowls. "The doctor said it was just bad luck, natural causes, nothing suspicious. But the doctor was in Hargrave's pocket, and my Rebecca had been healthy as a horse before that visit." Vera picked up her spoon but didn't eat. "My mother died the same way." Their eyes met across the table. 10 years ago," Vera continued, her voice steady despite the pain behind it, "Hargrave proposed to her. She was a widow, my father had just died, and Hargrave thought she'd be grateful for the offer. When she refused him," Vera's jaw clenched. "When she said no, he left angry. A month later she took sick. Fever, delirium, dead in 2 weeks." "The same pattern," Caleb breathed. "My father had debts, gambling, drinking, the usual wasteful stupidity. When my mother died, Hargrave bought those debts. Said my sister and I would work them off. Said it was legal and binding, and if we refused—" Vera's hand trembled slightly. "He said we'd end up like our mother, sick and alone and dead." "Your sister?" Caleb leaned forward. "Where is she now?" "Lila." Vera's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "She's 16, still at Hargrave's ranch. He keeps her as insurance to make sure I don't run or talk or fight back." Her voice broke. "She's my insurance, my chain. The reason I stayed as long as I did. But you left." "I'm not leaving." Vera met his gaze, fierce and determined. "I'm planning. This isn't running away. This is the first move in getting her free." Caleb sat back, processing. A woman desperate enough to sell herself to a stranger, smart enough to have a larger plan, brave enough to trust that plan would work. And Hargrave, that bastard, had destroyed both their families with the same method, the same poison, the same lies. "What do you need?" Caleb asked. Vera blinked. "What? To get your sister free, to stop Hargrave. What do you need?" She stared at him. "Why would you help me?" "Because I couldn't save Rebecca." The truth came out raw and painful. "Because I've spent 6 years on this mountain hiding from my failure. Because maybe, just maybe, if I help you save Lila, some small part of that guilt will ease. He stood moved to the window overlooking the dark forest. And because Hargrave needs to be stopped. How many others has he destroyed? How many families poisoned or broken or bought like you were today? Vera rose slowly, came to stand beside him. For a long moment they looked out at the same darkness. I don't know if I can trust you, she said finally. I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore. Then don't trust me. Caleb turned to face her. But use me. Use my cabin, my supplies, my knowledge of these mountains. Stay through the winter. In the spring I'll give you money to start over, wherever you want to go. And if Hargrave comes looking, then I'll tell him you ran, west maybe, or south. I bought a woman at auction who disappeared in the night. How was I supposed to stop her? He held her gaze. But he won't come, not for a while. He'll think you're broken. He'll think whoever bought you will do his work for him. Vera's eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, the trap, the ulterior motive. She must not have found it because she exhaled slowly and nodded. All right, through the winter, but she straightened, meeting him as an equal. If Hargrave comes for me, you don't give me up, even if it costs you. That's my condition. Caleb extended his hand. Deal. Her hand was rough with calluses when she took his, warm and strong and alive. They shook once, firmly sealing a bargain neither fully understood yet. That night Caleb gave Vera the bed and made himself a pallet by the fire. She didn't argue, too exhausted to protest. He lay awake long after her breathing evened out into sleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering what he'd gotten himself into. Buying a woman, hiding her from one of the most powerful men in the territory. Planning to go up against Cyrus Hargrave with nothing but old anger and new desperation. Rebecca would have called him an idiot. She also would have insisted they help. Caleb smiled into the darkness at that. Yes, Rebecca had always had a spine of steel beneath her gentle exterior. She would have taken one look at Vera and said, well, we can't turn her away, can we? But Rebecca was 6 years dead and Caleb was 41 years old and so tired of being alone. He rolled over, punching the makeshift pillow into a better shape. Tomorrow he'd start teaching Vera the lay of the land. The trails Hargrave's men wouldn't know. The places to hide if it came to that. Tomorrow he'd figure out how to keep them both alive. Tonight he'd just let himself feel something other than grief for the first time in 6 years. Hope maybe, or purpose, or just the simple comfort of another person breathing in the same room. Across the cabin Vera lay awake as well. She'd learned long ago to sleep light and wake at the smallest sound. 3 years of listening for Hargrave's footsteps had trained her well. But this was different. This cabin was different. This man was different. He'd bought her expecting someone else, hoping to fill a void with a woman who looked like his lost love. That should have made her angry, should have felt like being used. Instead, it felt honest, painfully honest. He wanted a ghost. She wanted freedom. Both of them were using each other for something they couldn't have. At least they were honest about it. Vera turned onto her side, facing the wall. Through the rough logs she could hear night sounds, an owl hunting, wind in the pines, the far-off howl of a wolf, lonely and wild. She thought of Lila locked in a room at Hargrave's ranch, counting days on the wall, waiting for a rescue that might never come. "Hold on," Vera whispered into the darkness. "I'm coming for you, little bird. Just hold on a bit longer." She closed her eyes and let herself imagine it. Walking into that ranch, taking her sister's hand, walking out free, both of them free, finally truly free. It was a dream, a desperate, probably impossible dream. But it was hers. And for the first time in 3 years, Vera Brennan let herself believe it might actually come true. Morning came cold and clear, frost glittering on the porch boards like scattered diamonds. Vera woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, luxuries she'd almost forgotten existed. Caleb was already up, moving quietly around the small cabin. He'd clearly been awake for hours, the fire stoked, high supplies organized, his rifle cleaned and leaning by the door. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee's hot if you want some." Vera sat up wincing as her stiff muscles protested. The bruises from 3 years of Hargrave's casual violence were fading, but they'd left their mark. She'd always be a little broken, a little scarred. But maybe that was all right. "Thank you." She took the cup he offered, wrapping her hands around the warm tin. The first sip was bitter and perfect. "This is good. One thing I can do right." Caleb cracked eggs into the pan. "Toby, my friend, he brings me real coffee beans from town. Says I'm too isolated to suffer bad coffee on top of everything else. Toby sounds wise." "He is. Nosy, but wise." Caleb glanced at her. "He'll probably visit soon. Old man can't stand not knowing what's happening. When he sees you here, will he tell Hargrave?" "No." Caleb's answer was immediate and certain. "Toby's known me since I was young. He knew Rebecca. He hates Hargrave as much as anyone, but he'll ask questions." "What will you tell him?" Caleb plated the eggs and bacon set, one in front of her. "The truth. That I bought you. That you're staying through winter. That it's none of his damned business beyond that." Vera almost smiled. Almost. "You're not much for social niceties, are you? Spent 6 years alone on a mountain, tend to lose the habit." He sat across from her, his own plate untouched. "But I meant what I said last night. You're safe here. Whatever story you want told, I'll back it." They ate in comfortable silence. Outside, morning light turned the frost to mist, burning away in pale gold streaks. Vera watched through the window, memorizing the landscape. Every trail, every landmark, every escape route, just in case. After breakfast, Caleb showed her around the property. The small vegetable garden, now mostly harvested for winter. The cold cellar dug into the hillside. The lean-to, where he kept his horse and trapping supplies. "Can you shoot?" he asked, pulling a rifle from the rack. "I know which end the bullet comes out of." "Not good enough." He handed her the weapon, showed her how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel. "Bears come through sometimes. Wolves. And maybe worse than animals." They spent the morning on the ridge behind the cabin, Caleb teaching Vera to shoot at targets he'd set up against dead trees. She was a quick learner, her hands steady, despite their rough treatment. "You're good at this," Caleb observed after she hit 3 targets in a row. "I'm good at surviving." Vera lowered the rifle, her jaw set. "Whatever it takes to survive, I learned fast." Something in her voice made Caleb's chest tighten. 3 years with Hargrave. 3 years of learning to endure, to adapt, to become whatever she needed to be to stay alive. No wonder she seemed older than her 29 years. They were heading back to the cabin when they heard a horse approaching. Caleb's hand went automatically to his pistol. Vera tensed, ready to run or fight, whichever was needed. Then a voice called out, querulous and familiar. "Caleb Rivers, if you're going to shoot me for visiting, at least give an old man warning first." Caleb relaxed. "It's Toby. It's all right." Tobias Rivers, no relation despite the shared name, rode into the clearing on a rangy mule. He was 65 and looked older, his face weathered like old leather, his beard more white than gray. But his eyes were sharp as he took in the scene before him. Caleb standing protective beside a tall woman with short hair and mismatched eyes. "Well," Toby said, dismounting with the careful slowness of old joints, "this is unexpected." "Toby, this is Vera Toby." Caleb kept his introduction brief. "She's staying through winter." Toby's eyebrows climbed toward his fur cap. "Is that so? And how'd this arrangement come about?" "None of your business." "You buying women at auction is my business, boy. Whole town's talking about it. Howard Finch said you paid $10 for a hooded woman and rode off like the devil was chasing you." Toby's eyes narrowed. "That true?" Vera stepped forward before Caleb could answer. "It's true. And it was my idea. I paid Finch to sell me. I needed to get away from my previous employer. Mr. Rivers was kind enough to help." "Previous employer." Toby's voice was flat. "You mean Cyrus Hargrave?" Silence fell over the clearing like a physical weight. "How did you know?" Vera asked quietly. "Because Hargrave's the only one in 3 counties who keeps indentured servants, treats them like slaves in everything but name." Toby spat tobacco juice onto the ground with vicious precision. "And because I recognize that look in your eyes, girl, I've seen it before. On people Hargrave's broken." He turned to Caleb. "You know what you've done. You know what fire you're playing with." "I know," Caleb said simply, "and you're doing it anyway." "I am." Toby stared at him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled, fierce and approving. "Good. About damn time you came down off this mountain and rejoined the living." He looked at Vera. "You've got spine, girl. I respect that. And you've got Caleb here on your side, which means you've got me too." Relief flooded Vera's features so quickly she couldn't hide it. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. When Hargrave finds out where you are, and he will find out, there'll be hell to pay." Toby tied his mule to the porch rail. "Now someone want to tell me the full story before I die of curiosity." They went inside. Over fresh coffee, Vera and Caleb took turns explaining the auction, the plan to rescue Lila, the shared history of loss at Hargrave's hands. Toby listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing grimmer with each revelation. When they finished, he was quiet for a long time. "I lost someone to Hargrave too," he said finally. 20 years back, my daughter. She worked at his ranch, just a cook, nothing indentured. But he decided he wanted her. When she refused..." Toby's voice cracked. "Accident, they said. Horse spooked and threw her. Broke her neck." He looked up, eyes bright with old tears. "My girl was the best rider in the territory. She could gentle wild mustangs with patience alone. No way a horse spooked her unless someone made it spook." Vera reached across the table, covered his gnarled hand with hers. "I'm sorry." "We're all sorry." Toby squeezed her hand, then pulled away. "But sorry doesn't stop men like Hargrave. Action does. So what's your plan?" "We don't have one yet," Caleb admitted. "Just, survive winter. Build strength. Figure out a way to get Lila free without getting everyone killed." "Not much of a plan. It's what we have." Toby nodded slowly. Then he pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "Maybe this'll help, or maybe it'll make things worse. Either way, you should see it." Caleb unfolded the paper. His face went white. "What is it?" Vera asked. Caleb handed it to her without a word. The message was brief, written in elegant script on expensive paper. "Rivers, I know you have something of mine. We should discuss terms for its return. I'm a reasonable man despite what you may have heard. Come to my ranch, and we'll settle this like civilized people. Or don't come, and I'll be forced to collect what's mine myself. You have 3 days. C.H. Vera's hands shook as she read it. "He knows, already. How?" "Howard Finch." Toby's voice was grim. "Found dead this morning. Neck broken in a fall, they're saying. But there were bruises, signs of a fight. Hargrave got to him. Made him talk before killing him." "Finch was supposed to..." Vera couldn't finish. "Supposed to keep quiet." "Yeah." Toby shook his head. "Hargrave doesn't leave loose ends. And now he knows exactly where you are and who you're with." Caleb stood abruptly, began pacing. 3 days. He's giving us 3 days to panic, to run, to make a mistake. Or to bring Vera to him. Toby looked at the younger man. "That's what he expects. For you to realize you're in over your head and hand her over. That's not happening." "I know. But he doesn't know you, boy. He thinks everyone has a price, everyone can be scared into submission." Toby stood as well, old joints creaking. "Which gives us an advantage." "How?" Vera asked. "Because scared men are predictable, but brave ones..." Toby smiled sharp as a knife. "Brave ones do crazy things, unexpected things." Caleb stopped pacing, looked at Toby, then at Vera. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we don't wait for Hargrave to come to us. I'm suggesting we take the fight to him." Toby pulled a crude map from another pocket, spread it on the table. "My boys have been trapping up near Hargrave's ranch. They know the layout, the guards, the schedules. We've got eyes on that place, Caleb. We have for years, waiting for a chance." "A chance for what?" "Justice." Toby's finger stabbed the map. "Here's where they keep the indentured servants. Here's Hargrave's study, where he keeps his records. And here," he pointed to a small square on the east wing, "here's where they've got a young girl locked up. 16 years old, they say. Dark hair, scared eyes. Vera gasped. Lila. If we're smart, if we're quick, we can get her out. Toby looked between them. But it's got to be soon, before Hargrave tightens security, before he realizes you're not going to just hand Vera over. Caleb's mind was racing. We'd need help. More than just us three. I've got 6 men I trust. Trappers, all of them. Hard men who know how to fight and keep their mouths shut. Toby rolled up the map. Question is, are you willing to risk it? Because once we do this, there's no going back. Hargrave will come for all of us. He's already coming. Vera's voice was steady, determined. At least this way, we choose the terms. Caleb looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd survived 3 years of hell, who'd orchestrated her own escape, who'd chosen to fight instead of run. And he thought of Rebecca, how she'd faced her death with courage even though she must have known Hargrave was killing her. How she'd made Caleb promise to live, to not let grief destroy him. He'd broken that promise for 6 years. Maybe it was time to keep it. All right, Caleb said. We planned this properly. We don't go in guns blazing like idiots. We're smart, we're careful, and we make sure Lila gets out alive no matter what. Agreed. Toby stuck out his hand. Partners. Caleb shook it. Partners. Vera put her hand on top of theirs. Partners. For a moment the three of them stood there, an old man seeking revenge for his daughter, a widower trying to fill the void of his wife, a woman fighting to save her sister. 3 broken people binding themselves together with shared purpose. It should have felt desperate, hopeless even. Instead, it felt like the first solid ground Vera had stood on in years. After Toby left with promises to return with his men in 2 days, Caleb and Vera sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the western peaks. Are you afraid? Vera asked quietly. Terrified. Caleb didn't hesitate. I haven't fought anyone in 6 years, haven't wanted to, haven't cared enough about anything to risk my life. And now... He turned to look at her. Those eyes so different from Rebecca's, but somehow still reaching into the same hollow place in his chest. Now I have something to fight for. Vera held his gaze. Something passed between them. Not love, not yet. But recognition, understanding, the beginning of trust. Caleb, she said carefully, after this is over, if we survive, what happens to us? What do you want to happen? I don't know. She looked away out at the darkening forest. I've never been free to choose before. My father chose for me, selling me to pay his debts. Hargrave chose for me what I wore, what I ate when I slept. Even today, letting you buy me that was still someone else's choice. Then make your own. Caleb's voice was gentle. Stay. Leave. Whatever you decide, I'll support it. Vera was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned back to him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I want to stay, she whispered. Not because I have nowhere else to go, not because I'm afraid or need protection, but because when I look at you, I see someone who understands what it's like to lose everything and keep breathing anyway. And maybe we could heal together. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Not the sharp pain of grief, but something softer, possibility perhaps, or hope. I'd like that, he said. They sat together as night fell, not touching, but close. 2 damaged souls finding comfort in shared silence. Inside the cabin on the table, Hargrave's letter lay like a threat. 3 days until confrontation. 3 days to prepare. 3 days until they either freed Lila and exposed Hargrave's crimes or died trying. But for this moment, this one quiet moment, Vera and Caleb let themselves believe it would work. That justice was possible. That freedom was within reach. That ghosts could finally be laid to rest, and shadows could retreat before the light of something new, something real, something worth fighting for. The church stood at the edge of Cedar Ridge, small and white against the autumn sky. Caleb had ridden down before dawn, leaving Vera at the cabin with his rifle and strict instructions to shoot first and ask questions never. The mountain air was cold enough to burn his lungs sharp with the promise of early snow. Inside the church was empty except for one woman kneeling in the front pew. Agnes Caldwell didn't turn when Caleb's boots echoed on the wooden floor. She remained motionless, head bowed, hands clasped so tight her knuckles showed white even in the dim light filtering through stained glass. "Mrs. Caldwell," Caleb said quietly, "I wondered if you'd come." Her voice was rough, worn down by years of swallowing words she couldn't say. "Toby said you might. Said you were planning something foolish and noble in equal measure." She rose slowly, arthritis making the movement painful. When she turned to face him, Caleb saw a woman aged beyond her 38 years. Gray, streaked-through hair pulled back in a severe bun, lines carved deep around eyes that had seen too much and said too little. "I need your help," Caleb said. No preamble, no pleasantries, just truth. Agnes laughed bitter as winter wind. "You need my help breaking into Cyrus Hargrave's ranch to steal a girl he considers his property. You need my help committing what he'll call theft, and I'll call rescue." She moved closer, her eyes searching his face. "The question is, why should I risk my neck for your cause? Because you've been risking it for years." Caleb held her gaze. "Every day you stay in that house watching him hurt people, saying nothing. That's its own kind of risk, isn't it? To your soul, if not your body." Something flickered across Agnes's face. Pain, maybe? Or recognition? "Toby told you about me?" "He told me you were indentured once. That Hargrave freed you when you got too old for his interest. That you stayed because you had nowhere else to go." Caleb paused. "He also told me you've been protecting Lila Brennan, keeping her safe as much as anyone can in that place." Agnes's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "That child. She has her sister's eyes, you know. Different colors, like God couldn't decide which was more beautiful, so he gave her both." Her voice cracked. "She reminds me of my daughter, the one I lost." "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring back the dead." Agnes wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, angry at herself for showing weakness. "But maybe it can save the living. What do you need to know?" Caleb pulled Toby's crude map from his coat. "Everything. Guard rotations, locked rooms, Hargrave's schedule, where he keeps his records, his evidence, anything that could prove what he's done." They sat in the back pew, and Agnes talked. She talked about 15 years of watching Cyrus Hargrave destroy lives with the casual cruelty of a man who believed the world owed him everything. About the study on the second floor where he kept ledgers documenting debts, both real and fabricated. About the safe behind a painting of his mother combination written in a notebook he thought no one knew about. She talked about Lila locked in the East Wing, but given roof access on clear days because even Hargrave wasn't cruel enough to deny a young girl sunshine. About how the girl counted days on her wall, whispering her sister's name like a prayer. "He's planning to marry her." Agnes said the words forcing themselves out like poison being drawn from a wound. "Her 17th birthday is in 4 weeks. He's already ordered the dress, hired a preacher who won't ask questions. Says it'll be legal once she's 17, that he's done nothing wrong by waiting." Caleb's hands clenched into fists. "He's insane. He's methodical." Agnes's correction was sharp. "That's what makes him dangerous. Every cruelty calculated, every crime wrapped in legal paperwork. The man doesn't act on impulse. He plans." "Then we'll have to plan better." Caleb studied the map, memorizing distances, noting vulnerabilities. "Can you get us inside? I can drug his evening brandy. He drinks 1 glass every night at 9 like clockwork. 20 minutes later, he's asleep in his chair. That gives you maybe 2 hours before he wakes. And the guards, 6 men rotate shifts, 3 on duty at night patrolling the grounds, but they're lazy, more interested in cards and whiskey than actual watching." Agnes's mouth twisted. "Hargrave's arrogance is his weakness. He doesn't believe anyone would dare challenge him. He's about to learn different." Agnes looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a small brass key. "East Wing, 3rd door on the left. This opens Lila's room. Get her out, mister. Rivers, whatever else happens, get that child to safety." Caleb took the key, felt its weight in his palm. What about you? When Hargrave realizes what happened, he'll know you helped. Let him know. Agnes stood, her spine straightening with a decision made. I've been silent too long. Time I did something worth the risk. They parted at the church door, conspirators in the pale morning light. As Caleb rode back up the mountain, he felt the key burning in his pocket like a promise, or a curse. Vera was waiting on the porch when he returned, rifle across her knees, eyes tracking his approach with the wariness of prey that had learned to expect predators. When she saw it was him, some of the tension left her shoulders. Not all. Maybe never all, but enough. Well, she asked as he dismounted, we have an inside woman, Agnes Caldwell Hargrave's housekeeper. She'll help us get to Lila. Caleb climbed the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. But it's dangerous. More dangerous than I thought. It was always going to be dangerous. Vera set the rifle aside. Tell me everything. They went inside. Over coffee that had gone bitter from sitting too long on the stove, Caleb relayed Agnes's information, the layout of the ranch, the guard patterns, the window of opportunity when Hargrave would be drugged and vulnerable. Vera listened without interrupting, her mind clearly working through scenarios, calculating risks. 2 hours, she said finally. That's not much time. It's what we have. Then we'll have to be fast. She looked up at him, those mismatched eyes fierce with determination. When, tomorrow night, Toby's men arrive today to help with the approach and extraction. Agnes will drug Hargrave's brandy at 9. We go in at 9:30. That's not much time to prepare. No. Caleb reached across the table, covered her hand with his. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no turning back. Vera's fingers curled around his, holding tight. I've been turning back my whole life. Running, hiding, trying to survive by being invisible. I'm done with that. Tomorrow night I stop running and start fighting. The determination in her voice made something fierce bloom in Caleb's chest. This was the woman who'd orchestrated her own escape, who'd trusted a stranger to buy her freedom, who refused to abandon her sister, no matter the cost. This was a woman worth fighting beside. They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Caleb showed Vera how to move through forest silently, how to use shadows for cover, how to reload a rifle in the dark. She was a quick study, her body remembering skills her mind had tried to forget. You've done this before, Caleb observed as she moved through the trees without snapping a single twig. Hargrave used to send me to hunt rabbits when he was angry. Vera's voice was flat, emotionless. Said if I didn't bring back something for dinner, I didn't eat. You learn to move quiet when starvation is the alternative. Caleb felt rage kindle in his gut. Every new detail about Hargrave's cruelty made him hate the man more, made him understand why Vera had been desperate enough to sell herself to escape. They practiced until noon, until Vera's movements were instinctive, until the rifle felt natural in her hands. Then they returned to the cabin to find Toby waiting with 6 men. Hard men Caleb saw immediately. Trappers and prospectors with weathered faces and cautious eyes. Men who'd learned to survive in country that killed the weak and foolish. Men who understood that sometimes the only law was what you could enforce yourself. Toby made introductions. Samuel, built like a bear with hands that could snap bone. Jacob and Joshua, twin brothers, who moved in eerie synchronization. Marcus, an ex-cavalry scout who knew more about tracking than any man Caleb had met. William, quiet and deadly with a rifle. And Thomas, the youngest, at 25, eager to prove himself. Gentlemen, Toby said, this is Caleb Rivers and Vera Brennan. Tomorrow night we're going to rob Cyrus Hargrave of something he values. Not money, not land, but a girl who doesn't belong to him and never did. The men nodded, faces grim. They knew Hargrave's reputation. Some had lost family to his schemes. All had scores to settle. Here's how it works. Toby spread the map on the cabin floor. Caleb and Vera go in through the east wing here. Samuel and the twins create a distraction at the main gate. Marcus watches the road for reinforcements. William takes high ground with his rifle, covers our escape. Thomas stays with the horses ready to move fast. And me? Toby grinned. I get to walk up to the front door and demand to speak with Mr. Hargrave about payment for furs. When he was too drugged to make sense, I'll make enough noise that the guards come running. That's your window, Caleb. You get in, get Lila, get those ledgers from his study, and get out before anyone realizes what's happening. What about Agnes? Vera asked. The housekeeper who's helping us. She leaves before we arrive, walks into town, claims she's visiting her sister, establishes an alibi. Toby's expression softened. Woman's risked enough. Time we protect her for a change. They refined the plan through the afternoon, working out signals, backup options, escape routes. By evening, everyone knew their role. The men bedded down around the property, checking weapons, maintaining that peculiar quiet that comes before violence. Vera and Caleb sat on the porch again as darkness fell. Tomorrow night they'd either free Lila or die trying. There was comfort in the certainty of it. "Tell me about Rebecca," Vera said suddenly. Caleb was surprised. "Why, because I'm sitting in her chair, sleeping in her bed, taking her place in your life. I should know who she was." It should have hurt, that blunt honesty. Instead, it felt like permission to remember without guilt. "She was kind," Caleb said slowly. "The kind of kind that doesn't make a show of itself. She'd leave food for hungry travelers, medicine for sick miners' families. Never wanted credit, never wanted thanks." He smiled at the memory. She loved this mountain. Used to say God lived closer to the peaks because the air was purer up here. Did she know Hargrave wanted your land? She knew. We both knew. Caleb's smile faded. He offered twice what it was worth. We refused. Said this was our home, where we'd raise our children, where we'd grow old together. His voice roughened. A week later, she got sick. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. Wanted to believe God wouldn't be so cruel. But you knew better. I knew. Deep down, I knew. Caleb looked at Vera. And I did nothing. Didn't confront Hargrave, didn't demand answers, didn't even push the doctor for real explanations. I just let her die. Let him get away with murder because I was too broken to fight. Vera was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over, took his hand. You were grieving. Grief isn't weakness. Isn't it? Caleb's laugh was bitter. I had 6 years to seek justice for Rebecca. 6 years to expose Hargrave, to save other families from the same fate. Instead, I hid up here feeling sorry for myself while he kept destroying lives. And now you're fighting back. Vera squeezed his hand. That counts for something. Does it? Or am I just using your sister's captivity to assuage my own guilt? I don't care why you're helping. Vera's voice was fierce. I only care that you are. Motivation doesn't matter. Action does. They sat in silence after that, hands linked, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring violence and risk. Tonight, they took comfort in shared warmth. Vera, Caleb said quietly, if something happens tomorrow, if I don't make it out. Don't. I need to say this. He turned to face her. You've reminded me what it means to feel something other than grief, to have purpose beyond just existing. Whatever happens, thank you for that. Vera's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Caleb Rivers, you're not allowed to die tomorrow. I forbid it, because I'm not done figuring out what this is between us. What is it? I don't know yet. She smiled, small and uncertain. But I'd like the chance to find out. Caleb leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, soft and hesitant, a question being asked and answered simultaneously. When they parted, both were breathing hard. Tomorrow, Vera whispered. We survive tomorrow. Then we figure out everything else. Deal. They went inside together, knowing sleep would be elusive, but trying anyway. Tomorrow would demand everything they had. Tonight, they took what comfort they could in proximity and shared hope. Dawn came gray and cold. Caleb woke to find Vera already up, checking her rifle for the 10th time. Nervous energy radiated from her in waves. Easy, he said. We've got hours yet. I know, She set the rifle down. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Then think about how it could go right. Think about walking out of there with Lila. Think about Hargrave facing justice." Before Vera could respond, rapid hoofbeats shattered the morning quiet. They both grabbed weapons, moving to defensive positions. A boy, maybe 14, slid off a winded horse. His face was streaked with tears and terror. "Mr. Rivers," he gasped. "I'm Billy from town, Mrs. Caldwell. She told me weeks ago if anything ever happened to her, I should ride here and warn you. She said if I came, it meant everything had gone wrong." Caleb's blood turned to ice. "What happened to her?" "She's dead, sir." Billy's voice broke. "Last night. Mr. Hargrave knows about the plan, about everything. He found out Mrs. Caldwell was helping you, and he killed her. Made it look like she fell down the stairs, but everyone knows what he does." Vera made a sound like she'd been punched. "There's more," Billy continued, voice breaking. "The girl Lila, she escaped. Last night before he could hurt her. Climbed down from the roof, ran. They're looking for her everywhere." "Where?" Caleb demanded. "Where would she go?" "I don't know, but—" Billy pulled a crumpled note from his pocket. "She left this. Someone found it, gave it to me to bring." Caleb unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky but legible. "Vera, they know you're coming. It's a trap. Don't come to the ranch. I'll find you. I remember the stories about the mountain cabin where Mother used to pick wildflowers. I'll come there. Wait for me, L." "She's coming here," Vera breathed. "But if Hargrave knows, he'll follow her." Caleb's mind raced. "He'll let her lead him right to us." As if summoned by those words, they heard it, distant but unmistakable. The sound of many horses moving fast through the forest below. Toby burst onto the porch. "Company coming." "Looks like a dozen riders, maybe more." Caleb and Vera's eyes met. The trap had reversed. They'd planned to attack Hargrave's fortress. Instead, he was bringing the war to them. "Get everyone inside," Caleb ordered. "Board the windows. Load every weapon we have." "What about Lila?" Vera's voice was desperate. "She's out there alone running toward us." "We hold the cabin. When she gets here, we'll protect her." Caleb grabbed her shoulders. "I promised to get her to safety. That promise still stands." Toby's men moved with practiced efficiency, transforming the cabin into a fortress. Furniture shoved against doors, shutters barred, rifles distributed, ammunition counted. They had maybe 10 minutes before Hargrave arrived. 10 minutes to prepare for a siege that would end in freedom or death. There was no middle ground left. The cabin fell into tense silence as they waited. 9 people packed into a space meant for one, all armed, all watching different approaches through cracks in the shuttered windows. Vera crouched by the east window rifle, ready eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of her sister. Caleb was beside her, his presence steady and solid. "She'll make it," he said quietly. "Lila's smart. She's your sister. She'll find a way. Or she'll lead a monster right to our door. Then we'll kill the monster." Caleb's voice was flat, certain. "Together." The sound of approaching horses grew louder, leather creaking, men calling to each other, the jingle of spurs and weapons. Then cutting through it all, a voice. Cultured, calm, terrifying in its reasonableness. "Caleb Rivers, I know you're in there. I know you have my property. And I know you're making a terrible mistake." Cyrus Hargrave had arrived. Through the window crack, Vera glimpsed him. Tall and lean, silver-haired, sitting his horse with the easy confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life. He wore expensive clothes, city clothes, completely out of place in the mountain wilderness. Behind him, 8 riders fanned out. Hard men with guns, hired muscle that knew its business. "I'm a reasonable man," Hargrave continued, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. "I don't want bloodshed. I just want what's mine. Send out Vera Brennan, and I'll leave the rest of you in peace." Caleb moved to the door but didn't open it. "She's not property, Hargrave. She's a human being, and she's not going anywhere." "How noble!" Hargrave's tone was mocking. The hermit who's been hiding on his mountain for 6 years suddenly develops a conscience. Tell me, Rivers, is it conscience? Or is it because she reminds you of your dead wife? Vera flinched. Caleb's jaw clenched. Rebecca. Hargrave savored the name. Beautiful woman. Such a waste, really. All I wanted was your land, a simple business transaction. But she had to make it personal, had to refuse me with such contempt. A pause. Did you ever wonder what her last words were? Don't, Caleb growled. Don't you dare. She called your name. Hargrave's voice was soft, intimate, cruel. As the poison worked through her system, as her body failed, she kept calling for you, begging you to save her, but you didn't. Did you? You just watched her die. Caleb's hands shook with rage. Vera grabbed his arm, held him back from doing something stupid. He's baiting you, she hissed. Don't give him what he wants. What I want, Hargrave called out, hearing the movement, is simple. My servant returned, my reputation intact, and my future wife delivered to me unharmed. Lila's not here, Caleb shouted back. And even if she was, you'd never touch her again. Oh, but she is nearby, isn't she? Hargrave's laugh was cold. Running through the woods, terrified and alone, heading straight for her sister. I have men tracking her right now. She'll lead them here, and when she does, I'll have everything I want. As if summoned by his words, a figure burst from the tree line. Small, stumbling, clearly exhausted. Lila Brennan. Vera! The girl's scream cut through the tension like a knife. Vera, help me! Behind her, two of Hargrave's men emerged from the forest, reaching for her. Vera didn't think. She threw open the shutters and fired. The first man went down with a bullet in his shoulder. The second dove for cover. Run! Vera screamed. Lila, run to the cabin! The girl sprinted across the clearing. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet as Hargrave's men opened fire. Samuel and Jacob returned fire from other windows, providing cover. Lila hit the porch at full speed. Toby yanked the door open, pulled her inside, slammed it shut again. The sisters collided in a desperate embrace, both sobbing, both alive, both together again after months of separation. I thought I'd never see you again, Lila gasped. I thought he'd killed you. I'm here. I'm here. Vera held her sister's face in her hands, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? No, just scared, so scared. Outside, Hargrave's voice rose again. How touching, a family reunion. But it changes nothing, Vera. You're still mine. Your sister is still mine. And now you've added kidnapping to your crimes. The only criminal here is you, Caleb shouted back. Murder, poisoning, illegal bondage. You think your money will protect you when the federal marshals hear about this? What marshals? Hargrave laughed. You think anyone will believe the word of a hermit, a runaway servant, and a collection of mountain trash? I own the local law. I own the judges. I own this entire territory. Not all of it. A new voice cut through the standoff, authoritative, steady. A man on horseback emerged from the southern trail, lean, weathered, with a U.S. Marshal badge glinting on his chest. Duncan Wright had arrived. Vera's heart leaped. She didn't know this man, but the badge meant law. Real law, federal law, not the corrupt local variety Hargrave controlled. Marshal Wright, Hargrave's tone shifted, became smoother. What brings federal law to this remote corner? Received a complaint. Duncan dismounted slowly, his limp evident. Multiple complaints, actually, about illegal debt bondage, suspicious deaths, abuse of indentured servants. Thought I'd investigate. Complaints from whom? Disgruntled employees with axes to grind. From a woman named Agnes Caldwell. She wrote to my office 3 weeks ago detailing your crimes. Sent evidence, documents, testimonies. Duncan's voice was hard. She died last night. Fell down the stairs, they say. Convenient timing, don't you think? Hargrave's face tightened. The woman was old. Accidents happen. They do, especially around you. Duncan moved closer, hand resting on his pistol. Here's what's going to happen, Hargrave. You're going to dismount. You're going to surrender your weapons. And you're going to answer questions about multiple deaths that coincidentally benefited you. On whose authority? Federal authority. Duncan pulled a warrant from his coat. Signed by a circuit judge who's very interested in your business practices. For a moment the clearing was silent. The balance had shifted. Hargrave no longer controlled the situation. Then he smiled, cold and calculating. "Marshal Wright, I respect the law, truly I do, but I'm afraid I can't comply with an illegal warrant based on the ravings of a delusional woman." He gestured to his men. "These gentlemen are here to protect my property. If you attempt to interfere, they're authorized to defend me." Duncan's eyes narrowed. "That's a threat against a federal officer." "It's a statement of fact." Hargrave's smile widened. "Now shall we settle this peacefully, or must we resort to unpleasantness?" Inside the cabin, Caleb made a decision. "I'm going out there." "No." Vera grabbed his arm. "It's what he wants. He'll kill you." "Maybe, but Duncan needs support. Right now it's one lawman against 9 armed men." Caleb checked his pistol. "I can even those odds." "Then I'm coming too." "No, you stay with Lila. Protect her. That's what matters." Vera wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in his eyes. This was his fight too, his chance to finally stand up to the man who'd killed Rebecca. "Come back to me," she whispered. "We have things to figure out. Remember." Caleb kissed her, quick and fierce. Then he was moving to the door. "Toby, Samuel, you're with me. The rest of you cover us from the windows." The 3 men stepped onto the porch, weapons ready. Duncan glanced at them, nodded fractionally. 4 against 9. Better odds. "Hargrave," Caleb called out. "This ends now. Either you surrender to the marshal, or we make you surrender." "You?" Hargrave's laugh was genuinely amused. "The broken widower who's been hiding for 6 years. You're going to make me do anything." "I am." Caleb stepped off the porch, moving into the open. "Because I'm done hiding, done letting you destroy lives, done letting fear keep me silent." How inspirational, how utterly pointless. Hargrave gestured to his men. "Kill him." The hired guns drew their weapons. Duncan drew faster. "Federal Marshal, stand down or face charges." No one moved. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Vera stepped onto the porch, rifle raised, eyes fierce. "You want me, Cyrus, I'm right here, but you'll have to kill everyone I love first, and we'll take most of you with us." Hargrave's eyes locked on her. For a moment something flickered across his face. Recognition, desire, rage. "You were supposed to be grateful," he said, almost plaintive. "I gave you everything. A home, food, purpose. All I asked in return was obedience. Was that so much?" "You asked for my soul?" Vera's voice was steady, clear. "You wanted me broken and grateful for the breaking. You wanted me to thank you for the cage." "I loved you." The words came out strangled. "Just like I loved your mother. Just like I loved every woman who refused to see what I offered." "You don't know what love is." Vera descended the stairs, moving to stand beside Caleb. "Love doesn't imprison. Love doesn't poison. Love doesn't own." "Then you'll die never understanding." Hargrave's hand dropped to his pistol. Everything happened at once. Hargrave drew. Duncan shouted a warning. Caleb pushed Vera aside. The first shot came from the cabin window. Vera, sighting carefully through the crack, fired. The bullet hit Hargrave's gun hand, sending his pistol flying. He screamed, clutching his shattered fingers. His men froze uncertain. Their employer was down bleeding. The federal marshal had the law on his side, and the people in the cabin had proven they could shoot. "Drop your weapons," Duncan ordered. "All of you, now." One by one, the hired guns complied. They were professionals. They knew when a job had gone bad. Toby and Samuel moved to collect the weapons while Duncan approached Hargrave. The rancher was on his knees, cradling his ruined hand, his face twisted with pain and disbelief. "Cyrus Hargrave," Duncan said formally, "you're under arrest for murder, illegal bondage, and attempted assault on a federal officer. You have the right to remain silent." But Hargrave wasn't silent. He was screaming. "She was mine. They were all mine. I built everything, sacrificed everything, and they had no right to refuse me." His voice rose to a shriek. "I loved them. I would have given them the world. You gave them hell," Vera said quietly. She stood over him, looking down at the man who'd haunted her nightmares for 3 years. And now you'll answer for it. Duncan hauled Hargrave to his feet. Get him on a horse. We're riding to Silver Creek. The circuit judge will want to hear this. As Hargrave was led away, still ranting about ownership and love and rights, Vera felt something inside her break loose. The fear she'd carried for so long, the certainty that he would always find her, always own her, always win. He was just a man, wounded and raving and powerless. Just a man. Caleb's arm came around her shoulders. She leaned into him, suddenly exhausted. It's over, he murmured. You're free. Lila emerged from the cabin, moving to her sister's side. The three of them stood together watching Hargrave and his men disappear down the trail under Duncan's guard. What happens now? Lila asked. Now we testify, Vera said. We make sure he never hurts anyone again. And after that, Vera looked up at Caleb, saw the question in his eyes, the hope. After that, she said slowly, we figure out how to live, really live, not just survive. Caleb smiled, genuine and warm and free. I think I can manage that. The sun was setting behind the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Around them, Toby's men began the cleanup, tending to minor wounds, securing the property. But Vera and Caleb and Lila just stood there, breathing in the mountain air, feeling the weight of captivity lift. Tomorrow would bring trials and testimonies, legal proceedings and difficult questions. Tonight, they were simply free. And for the first time in years, that was enough. 2 weeks had passed since the siege at the cabin, 2 weeks of statements and depositions of federal marshals combing through Hargrave's ranch of evidence, mounting like stones in a cairn, marking the dead. The courthouse in Silver Creek was packed beyond capacity. People stood in the aisles, crowded against the walls, spilled out onto the street. Word had spread across 3 territories about the trial. The powerful rancher who'd terrorized communities for decades was finally facing justice. Vera sat in the front row, Caleb beside her, Lila on her other side. The girl had barely left her sister's presence since their reunion, as if afraid that separation might somehow return her to captivity. Vera understood. Some fears took longer to fade than others. The judge, a stern man named Harrison Blackwell, called the court to order. The crowd fell silent. The territory versus Cyrus Hargrave, the bailiff announced. Charges include murder in the first degree, 3 counts, illegal bondage under color of debt, conspiracy to commit murder, assault with intent to kill a federal officer. Hargrave sat at the defense table, his ruined hand bandaged his face, gaunt from 2 weeks in a cell. Gone was the polished gentleman. In his place sat a man beginning to understand that money couldn't buy everything. His lawyer, an expensive suit from Denver, stood to address the court. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. These charges are based on hearsay and the testimony of disgruntled former employees. There is no physical evidence linking Mr. Hargrave to any crime. Duncan Wright rose from the prosecution table. His limp seemed less pronounced today, as if purpose had straightened his spine. Your Honor, the prosecution has extensive documentation, ledgers showing fabricated debts, correspondence proving conspiracy, and testimony from 12 individuals who suffered under the defendant's illegal bondage system. Judge Blackwell gestured to the prosecution. Call your first witness. Duncan looked at Vera. She nodded, stood moved to the witness stand with her head high. The oath was administered. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and met the eyes of everyone watching. State your name for the record. Vera Brennan. Miss Brennan, how did you come to be in the employ of Cyrus Hargrave? Vera took a breath, let it out slowly. Then she told her story. She told them about her mother's death, the suspicious fever that came after rejecting Hargrave's marriage proposal, the doctor who found nothing wrong until it was too late, the convenient timing. She told them about her father's debts, real and manufactured, about Hargrave buying those debts the day after the funeral, about being informed that she and her sister now belonged to him, legally bound for 7 years to work off money they'd never borrowed. She told them about 3 years of servitude, the beatings when she showed defiance, the isolation when she refused to comply, the casual cruelty of a man who believed ownership was his right. The courtroom was silent as death. "And your sister," Duncan prompted gently, "Lila Brennan, what was her situation?" "He kept her locked in a room, used her as leverage to ensure my obedience." Vera's voice remained steady, but her hands gripped the witness rail until her knuckles went white. "He told me that if I told anyone what was happening, Lila would suffer for it. And I believed him, because I'd seen what he did to people who crossed him." "Can you give an example?" "Agnes Caldwell." Vera looked directly at Hargrave. She was his housekeeper. She'd been indentured to him 15 years ago, freed when she aged out of his interest. She stayed because she had nowhere to go. When she helped me escape, when she tried to get evidence to the authorities, he killed her, pushed her down the stairs, and called it an accident. Hargrave's lawyer jumped up. "Objection! Speculation! The witness has no proof." "I have Agnes's diary." Duncan produced a leather-bound journal. She documented everything. Years of abuse, names of other victims, details of suspicious deaths. "She gave it to me 3 days before she died, along with a letter stating that if anything happened to her, Cyrus Hargrave would be responsible." The judge examined the diary, his expression growing darker with each page. "Objection overruled. The diary will be admitted as evidence." The testimony continued. Vera described her escape, the auction, Caleb's intervention, the siege at the cabin, Lila's desperate flight through the forest. When Duncan finished, the defense attorney approached for cross-examination. "Miss Brennan, you claim to have been held against your will, yet you remained at Mr. Hargrave's ranch for 3 years. Why didn't you simply leave?" "Because he threatened my sister. Because I had no money, no resources, nowhere to go. Because the local law was in his pocket, and I knew no one would believe me against a man of his wealth and influence." Convenient excuses. Survival tactics. Vera's eyes flashed. "You've never been powerless, have you? Never had to choose between your own freedom and your sister's safety. Never had to endure abuse because the alternative was watching someone you love suffer worse." The lawyer shifted tactics. "You paid Howard Finch to sell you at auction. That was your own plan, correct?" "Yes." "So you orchestrated your own escape. That hardly sounds like someone who was truly imprisoned." "I was desperate enough to sell myself to a stranger. Does that sound like the action of a free woman?" Vera leaned forward. "I gambled that whoever bought me would be better than Hargrave. I was lucky. But that doesn't change what he did, what he's been doing for decades." The lawyer had no response to that. More witnesses followed. Tobias testified about his daughter's death 20 years earlier, the suspicious riding accident after she rejected Hargrave's advances, the investigation that went nowhere. Caleb testified about Rebecca, the visit from Hargrave demanding they sell their land, her mysterious illness starting days later, the doctor who found nothing suspicious, the arsenic that Caleb discovered in her tea too late to save her. Duncan entered Rebecca's journal as evidence, her own words describing the bitter taste in her morning tea, the increasing weakness, the growing certainty that something was wrong. Lila testified, her young voice steady despite her fear. She described her captivity, the locked room, Hargrave's plans to marry her on her 17th birthday, the terror of knowing she was being saved for something worse than servitude. Then came the others, 12 former servants who'd escaped over the years, each with similar stories: fabricated debts, impossible working conditions, beatings and threats and systematic abuse. The pattern was undeniable. On the 3rd day of testimony, Hargrave's lawyer called his client to the stand. The rancher had aged a decade in 2 weeks. His silver hair seemed whiter, his face more lined, but his eyes still held that cold calculation. "Mr. Hargrave, how do you respond to these accusations?" Hargrave straightened in his chair. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man who'd spent a lifetime commanding obedience. "I'm a businessman. I buy debts. I offer employment to those who can't pay. Everything I've done has been legal and proper documented and witnessed." He looked directly at the jury. "These people owe me. They signed contracts. If they're unhappy with the terms, that's unfortunate, but it doesn't make me a criminal. And the deaths, Rebecca Rivers, Agnes Caldwell, the others, tragic coincidences." Hargrave's tone was almost sad. "People die. It's the nature of life. To suggest I had anything to do with natural illnesses or unfortunate accidents is absurd. What about Vera Brennan's mother?" For the first time, emotion cracked through Hargrave's facade, pain genuine and raw. "I loved Mary Brennan." His voice broke slightly. "I offered her everything. Marriage security, a life of comfort. She refused me, said I wasn't good enough, that I'd never be good enough." His hands clenched. "A month later she was dead. And yes, I bought her debts. I took responsibility for her daughters because no one else would. I gave them a home when they had nothing." "You call imprisonment a home." Duncan stood. "You call abuse responsibility. I call it order." Hargrave's voice rose. "These people need structure. They need someone to tell them what to do, how to live. Left to their own devices, they destroy themselves. I was helping them. By beating them, by locking them up, by poisoning those who refused you. I never poisoned anyone." But Hargrave's eyes shifted. The lie was visible. Duncan pulled out one final piece of evidence, a small glass vial half full of white powder. "This was found in your study safe. Analysis shows it's arsenic. The same arsenic that killed Rebecca Rivers, the same that killed Mary Brennan and 4 other women who rejected your advances over the past 25 years." The courtroom erupted. The judge pounded his gavel for order. Hargrave stared at the vial. His face went pale. "Where did you get that?" "From your safe, behind the painting of your mother, along with these." Duncan spread documents across the prosecution table. "Letters detailing your plans, records of poison purchases, a journal where you recorded each death, each victory as you called them. Those are private. They're evidence of serial murder." For a long moment Hargrave said nothing. Then slowly he began to laugh, soft at first, then building to something almost hysterical. "You think this is about murder? About money?" He looked at Vera, his eyes wild. "This is about love. I love these women, every single one. I offered them everything, and they threw it back in my face. They deserved what they got." The courtroom went silent. Even his lawyer looked horrified. Hargrave seemed to realize what he'd said. He tried to backtrack to claim he was speaking metaphorically, but it was too late. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Judge Blackwell adjourned for deliberation. The jury filed out, their faces grim. They returned in less than an hour. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood, an older man who'd listened to every word of testimony with increasing disgust. "We have your honor. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On all counts of illegal bondage, guilty. On conspiracy and assault, guilty." Hargrave made no sound, just sat there, staring at nothing. "Cyrus Hargrave," Judge Blackwell's voice was hard as iron, "you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. You will be transferred to the territorial prison to serve your sentence. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none." As they led Hargrave away in chains, he looked at Vera one final time. "You'll never be free of me," he said. "I'll haunt you forever." Vera stood, met his gaze with steady eyes. "No, you're just a man, and now you're nothing." She turned away, took Caleb's offered hand, and walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunlight. Behind them, Hargrave screamed her name. But she didn't look back. She was done looking back. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Former servants, families of victims, people who'd suffered under Hargrave's system and never thought they'd see justice. They cheered as Vera and Caleb emerged. Not a gentle applause, but a roar of triumph and relief. Duncan found them in the crowd. His face was lighter than Vera had ever seen it, as if a weight he'd carried for years had finally lifted. "It's done," he said simply. "Thank you." Vera didn't know what else to say. "For believing us, for fighting for us. I should have fought sooner. My daughter, Duncan's voice caught. She died in a situation like yours. I was too afraid then, too bound by regulations and procedures. I won't make that mistake again. He handed Vera an envelope. The territorial governor has issued an executive order. All debt bondage contracts in Montana are void effective immediately. 47 people will be freed because of your testimony. Vera's eyes filled with tears. Agnes would have been glad. She was braver than all of us. Duncan tipped his hat. If you need anything, you know where to find me. As the marshal walked away, Lila tugged on Vera's sleeve. What happens now? Where do we go? Vera looked at Caleb, saw the question in his eyes, the hope. Home, she said. We go home. The ride back to the mountain cabin took 2 days. They traveled slowly, stopping to camp under stars, taking time to breathe and process everything that had happened. Lila rode her own horse now, a gentle mare that Toby had gifted her. The girl was slowly emerging from her shell, asking questions about the world beyond Hargrave's ranch, making plans for a future she'd never dared imagine. I want to learn to read better, she said one evening around the campfire. Really read, not just the basics. And I want to help other girls like me, girls who think they have no choices. You will, Vera assured her. We'll figure it out together. When they finally crested the ridge and saw the cabin below, Vera felt something in her chest ease. This small log structure perched on the mountainside had become more than shelter. It had become home. Caleb helped them unload supplies, showing Lila the room he and Toby's men had built for her during the trial. Small but private, with a window facing east to catch the sunrise. The girl's eyes filled with tears. My own room. I've never had my own room. Now you do. Caleb's voice was gentle. For as long as you want it. That night, after Lila had fallen asleep, exhausted from travel and emotion, Vera and Caleb sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. There's something I need to do, Vera said quietly. Before we move forward, I need to say goodbye to the past. Caleb knew what she meant. Rebecca's grave. Will you take me? Of course. They rode out the next morning, leaving Lila in Toby's care. The old trapper had insisted on staying nearby, claiming someone needed to teach the girl how to trap and hunt properly. Really, Vera suspected he was making sure Lila never felt alone again. Rebecca Rivers's grave sat in a clearing halfway up the mountain, surrounded by aspen trees that whispered in the wind. The headstone was simple granite, weathered by 6 years of mountain weather. Rebecca Ann Rivers, 1856 to 1878. Beloved wife gone too soon, but never forgotten. Caleb dismounted slowly, his movements careful, as if approaching something sacred and fragile. Vera hung back, giving him space. He knelt beside the grave, one hand resting on the cool stone. Rebecca, he said softly, I'm sorry it's been so long. Sorry I've been hiding. Sorry for everything I didn't do when you needed me. The wind moved through the aspens, rustling leaves that were just beginning to turn gold. I brought someone. Caleb glanced back at Vera. Her name is Vera. She's not replacing you. I need you to understand that. What we had, what you meant to me, that's forever. Nothing changes that. Vera moved forward, knelt beside him. But I can't live in the past anymore. Caleb continued, his voice rough with emotion. I've been dead for 6 years, just breathing out of habit. Vera reminded me what it means to feel something other than grief. She reminded me that life is for the living. He pulled wildflowers from his saddlebag, the same kind Rebecca had loved, and placed them gently on the grave. I'll always love you, but I need to love her too. I need to move forward. A tear tracked down his weathered cheek. I hope that's okay. I hope you understand. Silence filled the clearing, just wind and rustling leaves, and 2 people kneeling beside a grave. Then Vera spoke, her voice steady and clear. I never met you, Rebecca, but I know you were loved. I know you were kind. I know you made Caleb into the kind of man who could save a stranger because it was the right thing to do. She touched the headstone lightly. Thank you for that. Thank you for loving him so well that he still has love left to give." She stood, helped Caleb to his feet. "I'll take care of him," Vera promised. "Not because you can't, because I want to, because he deserves someone who sees him for who he is, not just as a memory of someone else." Caleb pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. His shoulders shook with silent tears he'd held back for too long. Vera held him, let him grieve, gave him the space to finally say goodbye. When he pulled back, his eyes were red, but clearer than she'd ever seen them. "I'm ready now," he said. "Ready to live again. Really live." They stood together in the clearing, hands linked the grave, a quiet witness to endings and beginnings. Then Caleb turned to Vera, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was Rebecca's," he said quietly. "I want you to have it. Not as her replacement, but as my choice, my future." Vera stared at the ring, understanding the weight of what he was offering. "Vera Brennan," Caleb's voice was steady now, certain. "I can't promise I won't have bad days. Can't promise I won't sometimes see her face in memories. But I can promise that I'll love you as you are, that I'll fight for you, stand beside you, and build a future with you." He took her hand. "Will you marry me?" Vera looked at the ring, at the grave, at the man holding both past and future in his calloused hands. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They kissed there beside Rebecca's grave, sealing a promise between the living while honoring the dead. When they rode back down the mountain, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. But neither of them looked back. They were done with looking back. 6 months later, spring came early to the Montana mountains. Snow melted into rushing streams, wildflowers pushed through dark earth, and the world turned green with new life. The cabin had expanded, a proper addition now with space for Lila, and a small room that would soon be needed for another purpose. Neighbors had helped with the construction, former indentured servants who'd found work and homes and freedom thanks to Vera's testimony. Today, those same neighbors gathered in the clearing before the cabin. 20 people, maybe 30, all dressed in their finest clothes, not fancy by city standards, but clean and pressed and worn with pride. Duncan Wright stood at the front, a book of common prayer in his hands. He'd been ordained years ago before becoming a marshal and still remembered the words. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Caleb Rivers and Vera Brennan in holy matrimony." Vera stood beside Caleb wearing a simple cream dress that Lila had sewn from fabric they'd bought in town. Her short auburn hair had grown out slightly, just long enough to tuck wildflowers behind her ears. Her mismatched eyes were bright with tears she didn't bother to hide. Caleb wore his best shirt, the one Rebecca had made him years ago that he'd kept wrapped in paper and cedar. It still fit, though his shoulders seemed broader now, less bowed by grief. "Marriage is not to be entered into lightly," Duncan continued, "but with reverence and joy. These two have known sorrow. They've walked through fire, and they've chosen to walk forward together." He looked at Caleb. "Do you, Caleb Rivers, take Vera to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do." Caleb's voice was strong, certain. "I promise to love you forward, not backward, to build a future, not live in the past." Duncan turned to Vera. "And do you, Vera Brennan, take Caleb to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do." Vera's voice matched his in certainty. "I promise to stand beside you, to trust you, to build something beautiful with you from the ashes of what we lost." "Then by the power vested in me, by the territory of Montana and the grace of God, I pronounce you husband and wife." Duncan smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb pulled Vera close, kissed her softly. The gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Toby whooped loudly. Lila cried happy tears. Even Duncan wiped his eyes, thinking of his own daughter and the wedding she'd never have. The celebration lasted into the evening. Someone had brought a fiddle. Someone else produced moonshine of questionable legality but excellent quality. People danced in the clearing as the sun set and lanterns were lit. Vera danced with Caleb, then with Toby, then with Duncan. She watched Lila dance with young Billy, the boy who'd brought warning about Hargrave's attack. Saw her sister laugh, really laugh for the first time in years. As darkness fell and stars emerged, Caleb found Vera at the edge of the clearing, watching the celebration with quiet joy. "Happy?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "I've never been happy before. I don't know if I'm doing it right." Caleb laughed, pulled her close. "I don't think there's a wrong way to be happy." They swayed together to the distant fiddle music, not quite dancing, but not quite still. "Thank you," Vera said softly, "for seeing past the hood, for taking a chance on a stranger, for giving me a life I never thought I'd have. Thank you for reminding me life was worth living." They stood together as the party continued around them, two people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances and chosen to build something bright. The future stretched ahead, unknown and full of possibility. And for the first time in both their lives, that felt like a gift instead of a threat. 1 year later, autumn painted the mountains gold again. The cabin stood solid against the coming winter smoke, rising from the chimney voices drifting from the open windows. Inside, Vera sat in a rocking chair, her belly round with pregnancy. 8 months along, the baby active and insistent. Caleb knelt beside her, one hand on her stomach, feeling their child move. "Strong kicks," he said, wonder in his voice. "Takes after the mother." Or the father. Vera covered his hand with hers. "Stubborn and determined." Lila burst through the door, followed by 5 children ranging from 6 to 12. She'd opened a school in the cabin's new addition, teaching reading and writing to children whose parents had been freed from bondage. The territorial government paid her a small salary. It wasn't much, but it was hers, earned through her own work. "Miss Brennan," one of the children called. "Can we come back tomorrow?" "It's Mrs. Rivers now," Lila corrected gently. "My sister married, remember? But yes, tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Don't be late." The children scattered, running home through the golden afternoon. Lila closed the door, leaned against it with a satisfied sigh. "Good day?" Vera asked. "The best. Thomas finally read a whole page without help, and Mary can write her name." Lila moved to the kitchen, began preparing dinner with the ease of someone who'd found her place in the world. "How are you feeling?" "Large, uncomfortable, impatient." Vera smiled. "Happy." A knock at the door announced Duncan Wright. The marshal had become a regular visitor, often staying for dinner and conversation. He'd taken a particular interest in Lila's school, sometimes helping with the older students. "Evening, folks. Brought news from town." He handed Caleb a newspaper. "Thought you'd want to see this." The headline read, "Territorial Debt Bondage Act Officially Abolished." Below it, a long article about the new law crediting testimony from the Hargrave trial. "It's done," Caleb said quietly. "Really done." 47 people freed immediately, Duncan said, "and it can never happen again, at least not legally." Vera felt tears prick her eyes. Agnes would have been proud. She would have. Duncan's voice was soft. "I visit her grave sometimes. Tell her how many people she saved by being brave enough to document the truth." They sat down to dinner together, this makeshift family. Caleb and Vera, Lila, Duncan. Sometimes Toby joined them, though tonight the old man was helping a neighbor with a sick horse. The conversation flowed easily. Plans for the baby, Lila's students, Duncan's cases, normal things, beautiful in their ordinariness. After dinner, after Duncan had left and Lila had gone to bed, Caleb and Vera sat on the porch in the cool evening air. "Do you ever regret it?" Vera asked, taking a chance on a hooded stranger. "Never." Caleb's answer was immediate. "Best $10 I ever spent." Vera laughed, then winced as the baby kicked particularly hard. "What should we name the baby if it's a girl?" "Hope," Caleb said without hesitation, "because that's what we found, what we built." And if it's a boy, Tobias, after the man who wouldn't let me give up. Vera nodded satisfied. Good names, strong names. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Below them, lights flickered in distant cabins, families settling in for the night, children being tucked into bed. Life continuing in its quiet, beautiful way. Caleb, Vera said softly, I need to tell you something. He tensed slightly. What? I'm happy. She turned to look at him, her eyes bright in the lantern light. Really, truly happy. And it doesn't scare me anymore. Caleb pulled her close, careful of her pregnant belly. Good, because I plan on making you happy for the next 50 years. Only 50. Well, after that, we'll renegotiate. They laughed together, the sound carrying across the quiet mountain evening. Inside Vera's womb, their daughter kicked again, impatient to join this world of love and laughter and second chances. Hope Rivers would be born 3 weeks later during the first snowfall of winter. She would have her mother's auburn hair and her father's green eyes. She would grow up surrounded by love, never knowing captivity or fear. But that was still to come. Tonight, Vera and Caleb sat together under the stars, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. The mountains stood eternal around them, having witnessed another chapter in the long story of human resilience, of people who refused to let darkness win, of love that bloomed in the most unlikely places. A man who'd bought a hooded stranger for $10, a woman who'd orchestrated her own escape through desperate courage, a future built from the ruins of the past, and a happiness so profound it felt like grace. The end, but also the beginning.